Welcome to the Ditch the Struggle podcast. I'm your host, Alana Rosso. I'm a graphic designer turned career and success coach who knew I could do better, but kept falling short of where I wanted to go. But after years of exploring personal and career development, business, money mindset, and energy work, I'm here to tell you that yes, you can move from stuck and defeated to empowered and confident. Ready to dive in? Awesome. Together, let's ditch the struggle. Hi everyone, welcome back to Ditch the Struggle. I realize that it has been a while since I have done a story about one of my crazy jobs because I think we've established that I have had a very non-linear, slightly wacky career. If you go right back to episode 3, I give kind of the whole overview if you're a big picture thinker about how it all transpired and how I went from place to place. And if you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see my job history there for the most part. Most of it's on there. And so I'm going to take us back to 2018 today to a job that I had as an art director at the Shopping Channel. So a lot of you Canadians know what the Shopping Channel is. We call it TSC. If you're in the States, it's like our QVC, like that's our Canadian version. And it's online selling, right? And it is a very weird and wacky place. There's nothing else like it. And it was kind of on my bucket list to work there. And in 2018, I had the opportunity to work there. And how that transpired was just finishing a contract with the city of Mississauga. So I had done 15 months there. I was like covering a mat leave. And, that was a really great job in terms of I had like work-life balance. The commute was awful though. I was commuting from Toronto and Mississauga. So that really affected things, but an amazing team. Loved so much about the job. And for the most part, the workload was manageable. It was really busy, busier than you would have expected. Or, some people think a government job's going to be like doing nothing. No, not at all like that. We had a high performing, high functioning, high output creative team and department. But the contract came to an end, was looking for my next move. And one of my old bosses had told me that the Shopping Channel was looking for someone. She worked under the Rogers Corporation, so she knew about it. So TSC is owned by Rogers. And this was my third time working for Rogers. Previous times had been as a graphic designer in more the editorial departments. Both of those were pretty challenging experiences. And the second one especially was working on a few different magazines there. So I am not a Team Rogers fan. However, I really wanted to work at the Shopping Channel. And this opportunity came along. Had the interview, no contract really. It was like they were bringing me on as a vendor, like I was going to invoice them as an independent vendor, but I didn't have to sign like a 6-month thing, 1-year thing. I was going on an hourly rate and I'm pretty sure it was either $50 or $55 an hour. I always want to be transparent about money here, especially in the graphic design world. I feel like we don't talk about it enough. So you're looking at like gross, I guess that's like $100,000 a year approximately. If you're in Canada, that means after tax, you're probably taking home, like $18,000, something like that. That's about right, the way we're taxed. Anyway, so the money was fine. And yeah, I knew I wanted to do it, even though I was going to have to once again commute to Mississauga, which was just so brutal. Like I literally just finished this job and went straight into this one. So I get into this place and I was told that it was going to be insane. So I was warned. I knew this and I was still going to go for it. It didn't matter what anyone told me about the job. And I've actually talked to a friend who did this too. She went to work for a company that she's like, okay, I've heard it's crazy, but it's on my like bucket list. I really want to work there. I love this brand. I was like, you got to do it. Like sometimes you just have to go forward with things. And I really don't have regrets about any job that I've done, even if it was a really insane one. And this is the job I had before I went into the cosmetic job that really kind of, kind of traumatized me in the end. So I'll touch on that and how I got there. Because I only stayed at the Shopping Channel 3 months. So I was not there long. And 2 weeks in, so 14 days in, I am planning my exit. So I'm going to explain to you why I was doing that and how I kind of did that, because I was very thoughtful and deliberate about how I was going to do this. And this job was really a truly liberating moment for me because it was so crazy and insane. And I knew I couldn't sustain it, but the version of me from 5 years before this, 10 years before this, would have absolutely felt like they had to stay. I would have thought I've got to stick it out, even though I'm totally bruised and battered and the workload is bananas, banana town, as I like to say. I would feel like I had to stick it out, and I didn't. So this was why this job was really important, because I got to see some of the growth that I'd been through, and the decisions I was making were now different based on the growth that I had experienced. So this is why I kind of love this story, or this little chapter of my life. So I get into this job, and what I was working on was today's showstopper. So if you watch a shopping channel, maybe secretly you do, every day they have sometimes two a day. They have a showstopper where it's like a deal of the day, and you can purchase like Skechers sneakers or whatever the makeup is, and they have a crazy deal. It's an amazing deal. Like, it's really cheap. And so what they have to do is make graphics for it. So we have to shoot the product. Sometimes it's on figure, which means it's a model. Sometimes it's off figure. It's just like the pair of shoes sitting there or the bracelet. We have to get all of the shot and then in alignment with the brand standards and kind of the look and feel. There's a certain color palette. It's got to kind of work in a certain composition. And then these photographs that we do are spun out into tons and tons of different tactics and assets, because it's like a big, big mega machine, and they sell just a shit ton of product to this company. And that's really what it's all about. Like, when you're watching these hosts selling, they are pressured to sell a certain amount of dollars per minute. So it is like high pressure, high stakes. We have to move product, and we have to have amazing graphics. So I was brought in to be an art director specifically on today's showstoppers. They have in-house photography teams. There's studios in-house. It's like the place is massive. It's like a football field size. And there was at least 3 or 4 different photography studios I was working with. And I loved working with my photographers. Like, that was one of the perks of the job, or one of the things I really enjoyed. Great people, great, very creative. So I was in photography studios most of the day. That was like 90% of my job. Sometimes I was working up kind of concepts at the computer, and kind of working with the design team. They had an in-house graphic design team. I think there was like 8 or 9 of them, plus a couple freelancers, quite a few. They were worked to the bone. So one of the things I noticed right off the bat was just the volume of work was insane. And I'm just going to say leadership, we'll just call it leadership, really had no regard for the volume of work that was supposed to be pumped out. There was not really any support system. They didn't care. It was just like, it has to be done. And I noticed this right off the bat. I've seen this in other places, totally different from where I came from at the government job, where there was like such care about the team. In this case, there wasn't. And I felt such a compulsion to really help the team feel supported and have the empathy that they needed. And because I have worked as a hands-on graphic designer, I do think I'm really good at that, because when I'm in an art director role, I may not be doing that work, but I certainly know what goes into it. I certainly know the time, the energy. So it was pretty intense to see the volume of work, what we were pumping out. It was a pretty small team. We needed more art directors for sure. And I was kind of brought in as a stopgap. And what is really interesting is, while I was there, they actually posted the job. So it went into, the Rogers recruiting website, and I had to apply for the job. So I started there as a freelancer, and I'm doing the job, and I had to apply for it. And there were other people who wanted the job. I'm just going to leave it at that. So other people wanted the job, and I knew that. And I was very like, if I, get hired, okay. But if I don't, that's fine. Because as I said, 2 weeks in, I was already strategizing as to where I'm going to go next. So I did have to apply for the job. And I remember HR called me about the job and the application, and they're talking to me about the job. And I was like, yeah, so like, I'm actually doing the job. Like, right now, I'm just literally outside the photography studio, and I'm doing the job that you're talking about. Like, the HR person had no idea that I was actually like hired as a contractor to do the job. And he's like talking to me like, I didn't know anything about the job. I didn't know about the location, like anything. I was like, I'm literally, as we speak, doing the job. So, and I had to go through job interviews. So I'm going through job interviews for the job. Meanwhile, I'm still planning the exit. And I was like completely not too attached to whether I got the job or not. And I really just didn't want to keep working in Mississauga. But the job was insane. The volume was insane. And the other thing I should point out is that I am a very competent art director, and working in studio is, I can do it, but I would not say it's my zone of genius. Like, I don't walk into a photography studio and feel very at home immediately. And I don't feel like, okay, I just, can't wait to get into this. Like, I'm always a little bit nervous. I just don't know if it's at that place where I'm ever going to feel totally comfortable. And I think it's good to feel slightly nervous about things and on your toes. But there is something to be said about like, if you put me in front of a die line for a package, like I can just, I don't know. It's like coming home. It's just really easy for me. I can do it. And I do love art directing and coming up with concepts. But anyway, so I wasn't too sure about whether I want to stay doing that forever. Um, Design team's overworked. The marketing team, and I'm just going to call a spade here, was very weak and not very creative. So that made our job a little bit harder, coming up with concepts for campaigns and things like that. But it was this overarching sense of like, I will never feel valued and supported. And it doesn't matter how much work I pump out, it will never be enough. And I figured that out right away. Again, leadership. I was just getting a weird vibe. So what I have learned partly from this job, but throughout my years, is if I'm talking to someone and I can't really figure them out, like I'm a little bit confused, I'm a little bit not sure about someone, because I'm an empath and I'm very intuitive. So if I feel that, then I immediately know that something's not right and that that person is not someone that I actually want to spend a lot of time with. And I don't know if that comes across as harsh, but I can just sense that there's like some empathy missing on their part. They're just on a different page. And so immediately, if I can't get a read on someone, for me, that's a red flag. And I know that's just like kind of a vague red flag, but it's actually served me really well. So I was getting a lot of these red flags. I was like, I don't know about leadership here. I just feel like it's not really my vibe kind of thing. So I'm in the job, I'm doing it. I'm running from photography studio to photography studio to photography studio. It's kind of fun. Like there was a lot of fun behind the scenes because you're sometimes like, let's say you're shooting in the kitchen set and there's hosts next door doing like their segments and there's TV cameras everywhere. And it's like very vibrant and very fun. But again, coming back down to the volume of work, it was really insane. And what I started to notice quickly is I had no time. Like I wasn't even having time to eat. You know, those jobs where you don't have time to eat. And so I wasn't taking care of myself. I was starting to have like blood sugar issues because I wasn't eating properly. And I was running from studio to studio. One day I was so tired that I remember I needed a coffee. I was drinking so much coffee at the time. Oh my gosh. Like I gave up coffee in 2019, but I was drinking so much then. I was so tired that I wanted to get my reusable cup from my desk, but for me to walk like to the other side of this studio, like the whole football field, and get my cup and go back to the cafeteria just felt like I couldn't do it. I was like, I can't do it. So I just had to walk straight to the cafeteria, get a paper cup and call it a day. So I remember like just felt too hard and too long. I was basically working, I'd get there around between 8 and 8:30, and I wasn't leaving till about 7 most nights and then having to commute home. So it was crazy days. And then I started not taking care of myself. And then there was vending machines all over the place. And right outside one of the photographer's studio was a vending machine. And I started eating like on the regular O. Henry bars. So if you're American, that's kind of like a chocolate covered payday, but I don't think they're as good actually. But this is our Canadian payday and it's kind of a staple here. And I was eating these O. Henry bars like all the time. Like, and that sometimes like nothing else. It was so bad. And so I just wasn't taking care of myself. I was overworked. I was so tired. I was like, there's no relief coming because they're not hiring enough art directors. We need definitely more. We need more graphic designers. And so here's again where the insights start setting in. I was like, okay, nothing's going to change. They're not even promising things are going to change. So there's definitely nothing going to change. I'm really tired. I'm just in this pressure cooker all the time. Do I need to stay in this? Like, do I actually need to stay in this place? Even though I've just started, is it okay to leave? And I think we had these mental conversations with ourselves thinking, no, we can't leave. We've just started. Like, this is a cool company to work for. It's like the money's fine. I got to stay. But I just saw myself going downhill so freaking fast that I thought, no, I cannot stay. No. Like, no, we cannot do this. I would have felt the pressure to do it years ago, but I was no longer really wanting to stay addicted to that anguish. And I was really starting to understand the difference between hard work and suffering and hard work and struggle, which I've talked about throughout the show. And I didn't want to participate in anything that was bringing out the worst side of myself and making me feel like garbage. And I will tell you that the worst side of myself was coming out. This is how it played out. So I would use a weekend to recover. And this is kind of the way the whole 5-day work cycle goes anyway. But you kind of use the weekend to like just get your shit together and feel okay. And then Monday would come along and I'd have optimism. I'm like, okay, I can do this. And like, again, certain parts of the job were fun. I can do this. I'm going to do it. Get into work, have the really long day, make it through. By Tuesday, I'm starting to feel really tired, anxious, stressed out. By Wednesday, I have fully demonized. Okay. So I am cranky. I am short, not really at work, but by the time I got home, like for sure, Declan would get the most of it because I, battled through traffic on top of everything. I'm not well fed. I'm hangry. And then by Friday, I'm just like, can't even move, like so tired, so collapsing and just can't do it anymore. So this was the cycle. And I knew that I could not live in this cycle. Like this made no sense. And should anyone be living in that cycle? No. And I was no longer in my like 20s. I didn't want to have to do all that stupid stuff and suffer like that we feel like we have to do it. And there is something to be said about kind of paying your dues, so to speak, and kind of getting the experience. But there are options out there. And I always believe there are options. Like I am a career coach who believes in options, even when the economy is like tanking. And right now we're actually going through so much stuff in the economy. It is totally affecting job searching and how we do it. But there are opportunities out there. And so we're going back here again to, this is 2018. And I decided, no, this was not going to be my life. I'm going to figure something out. So 2 weeks in, I apply for a job on LinkedIn. I have like a huge track record for getting jobs through LinkedIn. And I don't know. I think it's a lot of it's luck. I think some of it is I know how to play the LinkedIn game. But I applied to a job on LinkedIn for a cosmetic company. And this is the one that I worked at for almost 3 years. That kind of ended with this crazy story, which again, I promise you that's coming as a 3-part series on this show. Just applied on LinkedIn. And I remember telling the old boss who recommended me to get the job or kind of put me forward to get the job at the shopping channel that I was applying to this cosmetic company. And she's like, oh, that's going to be like really hard to get. And I remember feeling kind of deflated. I was like, yeah, it's true. Like there's 1,000 people that want this job. But I applied to the job. And while I was at the shopping channel, I got a call from HR and they're like, I had a phone interview basically. So I started to move forward with this role at the cosmetic company. Now, it took a long time. It took like a full 2.5 months to get the job. So I finally did get the job. And I remember I was standing in the cafeteria lineup when I got the email from HR with the job offer and being so just thrilled because I needed to get out. By this point, never mind blood sugar issues, I had this awful episode of my blood pressure tanking. That happens to me once in a blue moon. It will go a little bit low. I don't really worry about high blood pressure. I can kind of go low. And I had been on the floor. We were doing an overhead shot of all these different products and this kind of montage thing with one of the photographers. So I'd been on my hands and knees for like, I don't know, hours. I guess I was getting up and just not eating and getting up too quickly or whatever I was doing. But my blood pressure just tanked and it took like an hour for it to even feel slightly normal. I just sat there in the cafeteria trying to eat whatever to bring my blood pressure up. For sure, I was probably putting caffeine and sugar into me and just feeling like such garbage. And that is, to me, just the simplest way to check in. Like, how are you feeling every day at your job? Like, are you feeling like garbage? Are you feeling totally anxious? And again, just couldn't keep doing it. But I was so grateful for the experience. And I knew I was like, okay, I'm ready to move on. And I had to bust it. And I say bust it to get this job at the cosmetic company because I knew there'd be a lot of people wanting the job. And I was getting through the interviews. But at one point there was the project interview, and this is really common. And in this case, it was a very fair project because they were asking me to do graphics for a campaign that's already launched, that's existed. So I wasn't creating any creative work that could be used in the future. So that's kind of the general gauge. Like if they're asking you to do something on something they can't capitalize on moving forward, then that's a very fair, reasonable request for these assignments. And I understand the need for these projects. Having a friend who's hired people, and she has just explained to me that if they don't have them do some kind of test or project, it can just end up being a total disaster and cost them so much money. So while I'm working this insane job at the shopping channel, balancing all these billion photo shoots, I had to create this project and execute it for this cosmetic company and get it all together and present it. So at some point I had to go in for the in-person interview. And I did not at the time know a huge amount about visual merchandising. I had done some retail environmental design, some displays for one of the agencies I worked at for mainly Sobeys, the grocery store. But I did not know a lot about like when you go into Shoppers Drug Mart or Sephora and there's what's called the gondola and you have the whole visual marketing display and with all the products that sit in it and what a planogram really was. I didn't know a lot about that. However, and this is a tip to be resourceful, I remembered that I had a friend that I did work with years ago at the agency who worked now for a company that made these displays for cosmetic companies and Sephora and things like that. So I called her up and emailed her and got a whole bunch of information that helped me to figure out what this project was. And I basically had to mock up a whole visual merchandising display for this mascara. I had to come up with some concepts and I did mood boards. I did so much work and I had to mock this up what they call in situ, where I took photographs in Sephora. I actually kind of like almost got arrested. That I'll have to explain that part, but took photographs in Sephora and Shoppers Drug Mart of the cosmetic company's displays. And then I created my own artwork, photoshopped it in to make it look like it was part of the display and did these renderings for my presentation. Anyway, I put like 30 to 35 hours into this project while exhausted because I had been working these crazy days. But I was so driven to get out of the shopping channel because I knew I couldn't sustain this, that the short-term pain of doing this project and going all in, and I was staying up so late, like 1, 2 in the morning, staying up that late to do it made sense because of the long-term goal, which was to get this job, which was a graphics and creative manager. And there was a small creative team and it was working in beauty and everyone seemed amazing there. And my initial boss was great there. So I busted it. And I had to make that decision to leave the shopping channel because I couldn't sustain it. And I gave myself permission to move on, even though it was like this short blip. Honestly, the 3 months there felt like 3 years, and I did learn enough. I learned like 3 years worth of stuff, especially when it came to photography, because I worked with so many talented photographers. But I also had to like bust it to get this new job and really just tap myself out to get it. And it was worth it. So I got that, email one day that I was offered the job. And then I started in, I think, July of 2018. And that began a whole journey working in the cosmetic industry. So the reason why I want to tell this story is a few things. One is that you really do have to give yourself permission to leave a job, even if you haven't been there very long, if you know it's not good for you, if you know it's not the right fit, if you know you're just going to get burnt out, and if you're feeling sick and your health is being affected. I mean, I was not even there basically 3 months, and my health took a nosedive, like a complete nosedive. Well, that's not good. Again, I would have stayed there if I hadn't had some of the knowledge that I have now. And there was something a little bit appealing about staying because it was kind of fun and cool and like different things. And like every day was different, which I do love. But long term, I knew that wasn't going to make sense. So you have to give yourself permission to leave a job, even if you've just been there. Like, I don't care if it's a week and you know it's not a good fit. And then the other part of this is really important, though, is that I know how hard it is to try and find a job when you're exhausted and you don't have much energy. And finding a job is a full-time job, basically, but you have to push through. And I don't like to use the word push very often, but that's when you really have to dig deep. And I will tell you, I dug deep. I was like, I had to find whatever morsel of energy I had. I was working those weekends. Oh, I have to tell you about how I almost got arrested, but not really, but it was really scary. You got to dig deep because the bigger picture, that goal, you've got to stay true to that vision. And I just knew I wanted out. And I knew that this new job would be a better fit for me. And it was a great fit for a long time. But the arresting piece, and I need to like preface this by saying, like, I'm not really a rule breaker for certain things. Like, If I was on like the subway, I wouldn't like not pay if there was an option to not pay. If there was like well, it used to be that there was a human person there that would take your ticket and stuff, like I would pay. So I don't like breaking certain rules. Career rules, I love breaking those. But I had to go into Shoppers Drug Mart to look at their display, like the cosmetic company's display, so I could take photographs and do like the project that I had to execute. So I went to the one, it was like a big one near my house, and I was taking all these photographs, and the beauty advisor came over and she's like, excuse me, what are you doing? And she started asking a whole bunch of questions. And I was like, oh, I didn't say I'm with the cosmetic company because I knew that would be misleading. But I said, I'm doing a project for the company. And she's like, okay, well then you're going to have to sign in because otherwise I'm going to have to get security. And she starts going on. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. So then I hightailed it out of there so fast, and I did not return to that Shoppers Drug Mart for probably 2 months. I was so freaked out. Now, I'm sure nothing really bad would have happened, but just the thought of security coming totally freaked me out. So I went running, but I had my photos. I got the project done. And again, I pushed through. I did whatever I had to do. And that's the part that's the resilience. That's the digging deep. That's the, like, you have to decide and make that very clear decision. Like, am I going to go all in and make a shift in my career? Am I going to change my job? What am I going to do? How willing am I? And I will say that I know a lot of people who talk about changing jobs, and they want to change jobs and they want to do something different, but they don't really do anything to make it happen. And, maybe they're applying to some jobs online, but they're not pushing forward, and they're not really working their asses off and putting 1,000% into those projects that they're presenting, or the presentation they have to do, or even putting in energy into the application process and tailoring your resume for certain job applications. You can't just use the same resume. And I guess I'll do an episode just on resumes and stuff, but you can't just put the same resume out to everybody. You've got to customize it. You've got to, what they call, tailor it. And listen, I knew no one at this cosmetic company. I had no connections with them on LinkedIn. I just wrote a very customized cover letter and kind of had my ducks in a row. And when it came down to it, I put 110% into the interviews and the project. And I just did my best and just let the chips fall where they may, right? There's no guarantees. But I will say the determination I had to leave this kind of stressful world, that you have to really, really want. You have to want to leave behind what's no longer working and believe that you deserve to have something better. Because I think that's a huge part of it. It's like we get into that mindset of like, this is all I deserve, or this is all I'm going to get, or this is as good as it gets, and this is to be expected. And we normalize feeling super frickin' stressed all day long. And I do think generally corporate culture is very toxic, and it's just banana town. It's just awful. But there are good jobs out there. There are good companies out there. There are good bosses out there. So you have to try and find them. And if it means bouncing from job to job for a while till you figure out what makes sense and what works for you, then I think that can make sense. And that's what worked for me. So it made sense for me to bounce around. It made sense for me to really tap into what was working for me, what my health was doing. And as I said, I gave myself permission to move on. I am so grateful for the time I had the shopping channel. It is like no other place in the world. It is crazy. But my time there was short, and I appreciate that. And so I encourage you to guys think about, when is your time up at a job? Like, when are you ready to go? And when you are ready to go, how can you dig deep so that you can move forward into something that you love and really find something that lights you up again? Because I promise you, there are those jobs out there. And if any way I can help you find that, give you some inspiration, that's what I'm here to do. So I'm wishing you the best of luck with your career search or your moves in your career. Know that you are worth a great job, that you bring value to the table, and that, yeah, you shouldn't be surviving on O. Henry chocolate bars for the entire duration of your job. Not a good idea. Take care, guys. Thank you for joining me today on Ditch the Struggle. You showing up here means so, so much to me. To dig deeper into the topics discussed today and to learn about my work, visit alanarosa.com. And don't forget to download your free resources while you're there. And if this episode resonated with you, please share with others who also want to ditch the struggle. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and a review, and let me know what you'd like to see more of on this podcast. And before I go, I want to leave you with my 3 favorite ways to ditch the struggle. Be your own best advocate, take baby steps for the win, and forget about a linear career path. It's overrated and you are doing just fine. See you next time.